Cold case. A straw solved the case 26 years after the murder. This is a tragic story of the murder of Cheryl Lynn Hall, who was found hanging from the doorknob of her townhome on September 9th, 1981. Cheryl had been happily married to Chuck and had just started a family with him. Chuck was the closest person to her, the last person to see her alive, and the one who found her body. On the momentous occasion of their marriage on October 6th, 1979, Chuck and Cheryl were joined by the adorable flower girl, Jackie Stiles, who added a touch of innocence and charm to the beautiful ceremony. They began their new life together in a peaceful and welcoming Aurora neighborhood, surrounded by a supportive network of family and friends. Their tastefully decorated townhome provided the perfect setting for entertaining guests, making cherished memories, and living a fulfilling life. On Wednesdays, Cheryl dedicated her time to her house cleaning and laundry. It was a well-known fact amongst her circle that she was home all day on that day. Chuck, on the other hand, would go to work but come back home for lunch, which gave the couple an opportunity to spend quality time together. However, on September 9th, 1981, Chuck would return home to find something out of place by the front door and the laundry that seemed to have been knocked over. Worried, he called out Cheryl, but she did not respond. As he climbed the stairs, he discovered the unimaginable. Cheryl, hanging from the doorknob with an iron cord around her neck. Desperate to save his beloved wife, Chuck attempted CPR, but to no avail. Overwhelmed with shock and grief, he ran downstairs and sought help from their neighbor. Their neighbor, who happened to be a nurse, was quick to respond to Chuck's distress call and helped in calling an ambulance or the police. Despite the shock and heartbreak, Chuck continued to perform CPR on his beloved wife until the paramedics arrived. Cheryl, affectionately called Cheryl by her mother Garrett Bailey, was a loving daughter who shared a close bond with her younger sister, Lisa Martinez. Despite a significant age gap, the two siblings were inseparable and spent many happy hours playing Barbies together. As with any investigation, the authorities looked at Chuck as the first possible suspect, being the closest person to Cheryl, the spouse, and the last one to see her alive. He fit the criteria for a number one suspect. This was a difficult reality check for Chuck, who was grieving over the loss of his beloved wife. Denise Crosby, the columnist at the Chicago Tribune, collaborated with the detective on the case and reported that the challenges of investigating a case where the grieving spouse was also the suspect. After Cheryl's tragic death, Chuck endures hours of grueling interrogation as investigators seek to confirm his account of events. Despite his deep love for his wife, the police had to consider all possible suspects, including Chuck himself. However, after investigating his whereabouts between 2:30 and 6 p.m. on that day of the murder, they ruled him out as a suspect. The investigators searched the crime scene for any evidence that may lead to the perpetrator. They collected items such as Cheryl's purse and door handles in the hope of finding latent fingerprints. Unfortunately, many of the fingerprints were smudged or overlaid, making identification difficult. During Cheryl's autopsy, the coroner found a blood stain under one of her fingernails, suggesting that the murder weapon was in close proximity. Cheryl's sister reported speaking with her on the phone at 3 p.m. On the day of her death, shortly after around 3:30 p.m., neighbors reported hearing a door slam and several loud thuds. Chuck arrived home at 6 p.m. to find Cheryl's lifeless body. The attorney involved in the case shared that one of the early aspects of the investigation was to explore the possibility of someone breaking into Cheryl Lynn's home and then encountering her. The detective assigned to the case also confirmed that the Halls had recently installed a deadbolt on their door, which was found to be intact during the investigation. Furthermore, there appeared to be no identification or indication of any disturbance within Cheryl Lynn's apartment, and nothing of significant value went missing. Larry Galloway and Cheryl Lynn Hall were acquaintances from high school, and both worked at the same cable company as Chuck. While they would socialize occasionally, Cheryl felt uneasy around Galloway during his expected visit to her home 2 weeks prior to her murder. She confided in a friend about this experience. During the investigation, Galloway cooperated with the authorities and provided information about his whereabouts and relationship with Cheryl and her husband. He claimed to have been mowing his parents' lawn during the time of the murder and stated that he had visited Cheryl's home to discuss union business with Chuck, who was a union steward. It was discovered that Chuck had saved Galloway's job at the cable company through the union. Despite this information, the police could not gather further leads from Galloway, and the case remained unsolved. There was no evidence to suggest Galloway's involvement in the murder. His unexpected visit and uneasy interaction with Cheryl raised questions that may warrant further investigation. After Larry Galloway refused to cooperate and Chuck had been cleared as a suspect, the investigation hit a dead end. Garna Bailey, mother of Cheryl, called Larry and warned him that he would face consequences for his actions. However, Larry responded callously and hung up on Garrett. This deeply angered Garrett, as Larry seemed to have no concern or remorse for what happened to Cheryl. Despite Garnett's frustration, the police were unable to gather any information or evidence or leads in the case, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Discover how a ruling prevented crucial DNA evidence from being gathered. In 1997, technology and DNA advancements had begun to emerge. However, Larry Galloway refused to provide a DNA sample to the police. Prosecutors took the case to a grand jury, which issued a subpoena ordering Galloway to provide a DNA sample. Unfortunately, Galloway's lawyers appealed the order to a judge who ultimately ruled that there was insufficient evidence to force him to provide a DNA sample. This decision prevented crucial evidence from being gathered that could have helped bring justice for Cheryl Lynn Hall's murder. With a decade of law enforcement experience under his belt, Jackie had a hunch about the Cheryl Hall murder case. He believed that Larry Galloway, a person of interest, held the key to solving the mystery. Jackie decided to set up surveillance on Holloway's residence and patiently awaited for over 2 hours until Galloway emerged with another man. Together they drove off to Chili's restaurant. Maintaining a visual on Galloway, Jackie watched as he ate his meal. After Galloway left the restaurant, Jackie approached his table to collect the straws, utensils, and napkins. It was a bold move, but it paid off. The DNA swab from the straw was a match to the bloodstain found under Cheryl's fingernails. Larry Galloway's arrest for Cheryl Hall's murder came with no emotional response from him, and he was compliant with the police. However, during questioning, he continued to show no remorse for his actions. The prosecutors faced a major challenge in building a strong case against Galloway, particularly in the volume of DNA recovered from the crime scene, which presented a significant concern due to any inconsistencies that could arise. Unfortunately, the case was built on DNA evidence, and the prosecutors realized that their case was far from airtight. Thus, a plea agreement was reached to hold Galloway accountable for his actions to the fullest extent possible, given the evidence available. Despite the obstacles and challenges that the prosecutors faced in this case, justice was served for Cheryl Hall, and her family was able to achieve a sense of closure. Larry Galloway was required to confess to the murder of Cheryl Hall as part of his plea agreement, but the reason behind his heinous act remains a mystery. The question remains unanswered: why would Larry harm her? This senseless act of violence has left a family without their beloved daughter and wife, and a community shocked and outraged. Adding to the family's pain, Larry was released from jail after serving only a fraction of his sentence. It's a devastating blow to the loved ones who have been tirelessly seeking justice for Cheryl. But then just a few months later, they're dealt with another tragedy as Chuck Hall, Cheryl's widower, succumbs to the cancer he had been fighting. Despite the unimaginable pain and loss, Chuck finds comfort in knowing that the truth has been revealed and that his name has been cleared. The family can now take solace in the fact that the world knows the truth about Chuck and Cheryl's tragic story, and they can finally begin to heal. This case reminds us of the importance of justice and accountability in our society, and the importance of supporting those who have suffered such a great loss.